My name is Mackenzie, and at 31, I never expected my life would become a cautionary tale about trust. Just last month, I sold my tech startup for $20 million. But if you'd seen me 5 years ago, standing in a wrinkled gown at my graduation, while my family smiled in a different direction, you wouldn't have seen a future CEO, just the forgotten daughter. They didn't clap. They didn't cheer. They weren't even sitting in my section. That morning, I saw balloons tied to the railing, lavender and silver, my sister's favorite colors, floating above a group of familiar faces gathered 3 rows down from the stage. My name was never on those cards. Not one sign said, "Congratulations, Mackenzie." They all had Bella's name printed in gold cursive, even though she wasn't graduating. I tried to convince myself that. They got confused, that maybe the signs were reused from something else, or maybe Bella was organizing a surprise. But as I walked toward them after the ceremony, still clutching the fake diploma they hand you before the real one gets mailed, no one stood up. My mom looked at her watch. My dad waved at someone behind me. My sister didn't even make eye contact. I was surrounded by strangers taking photos with proud parents, and all I got was a lukewarm hug and a question about whether I'd applied for more jobs yet. See, Bella was always the special one, the golden child. When we were in middle school, she got an entire Disney World trip for making the honor roll. I got a "well, you tried" cupcake and a lecture about effort. When she decided to become a fashion major, they funded an entire semester abroad: Paris, Milan, Tokyo. When I got accepted into one of the top STEM programs in the country, I was told to apply for scholarships because money's tight. Spoiler, it wasn't. I found out later they'd refinance the house to buy her a new car so she wouldn't have to suffer through public transport. College was brutal. I worked 2 jobs while coding through the night, surviving on caffeine and sheer defiance. Bella, on the other hand, hosted rooftop parties in Florence, flew home first class for winter break, and sent me passive-aggressive selfies captioned "Miss you." But not the stress. Meanwhile, I slept on a donated mattress and hoped my laptop wouldn't crash before finals. My roommates thought my family must have been dead. I didn't correct them. It was easier to say they're gone than explain the way I'd been emotionally ghosted. Graduation was supposed to be different. I had it circled on my calendar for years. I told myself, they'll come around. This is a big moment. They'll see me. But when I walked across that stage, diploma in hand, all I saw was Bella popping champagne in the background for herself. The next day, I found out why. They had thrown her a congratulatory brunch for getting a job interview. Not a job, not an offer, just an interview. That was the celebration. Mine? A $25 Starbucks gift card they forgot to activate. I didn't cry. Not then. I just shut off. I went home, changed my number, and moved states. I started over with nothing but a second-hand laptop, a lease I could barely afford, and a stubborn belief that one day, I'd build something that made them regret every silent moment. I didn't go no contact right away. That would have been too easy. Instead, I gave them the illusion I was busy, unavailable, traveling, working late. I sent vague updates every few months like "things are steady" or "I'm learning a lot." I never mentioned the sleepless nights, the ramen dinners, or the time I pawned my old tablet to cover rent. They didn't ask, so I didn't offer. 2 years in, I launched my startup. It wasn't glamorous at first. My office was a shared co-working desk next to a guy who sold artisanal socks. My first client paid in crypto. My second ghosted, but I kept building. I read, I coded, I pitched. Over time, the product grew a platform that simplified healthcare data for small clinics. By year 3, we were signing deals with hospitals. By year 4, we had a $7.8 million valuation. I never posted about it. Not on LinkedIn, not on Facebook. My family had no idea. They still thought I worked in IT support or something tech adjacent. Then came the acquisition. A major player in the healthcare space reached out. They wanted my product. Negotiations were long, messy, exhausting, but I held my ground. I walked into that final meeting with the same stare I gave them after my graduation. Cold, focused, strategic. When the ink dried, I wasn't just wealthy. I was untouchable, but I didn't rush to announce it. I waited. I knew the right moment would come, and it did. 6 weeks later, when Bella posted an Instagram reel crying about student debt and family support imbalances. It went viral. Suddenly, my inbox was full of distant cousins and former classmates sending the video and asking if I'd seen it. My mom left me a voicemail. "You should call your sister. She's really struggling right now. Maybe you can help out." That was the moment. That was the spark. That was when I decided I wasn't going to scream. I was going to show them what silence can build. The message from my mother was a masterclass in selective memory. She spoke like there hadn't been a decade of lopsided support, like I hadn't spent my early 20s quietly starving while they toasted Bella's every whim with Ross. "She's having a hard time, sweetheart," she cooed into the voicemail. "You've always been the independent one. Maybe you could help ease her burden?" I played it 3 times, not because I cared but because the audacity deserved an encore. I didn't reply. Not then. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on my condo balcony, and reread the acquisition terms for the 3rd time that day. 8 figures. My name alone on every line. No investors, no debts, no co-founders. I had done it all without them. And while they begged strangers on TikTok for donations and reposted Bella's crying selfie with GoFundMe links, I was quietly designing my next move, a moment so subtle it would sting more than any confrontation ever could. The first thing I did was purchase the house I grew up in. It wasn't on the market, but the current owners, an older couple who had renovated it after my parents downsized, were more than happy to accept my generous offer. I told them I needed it for sentimental reasons. They assumed I wanted to turn it into a rental. I didn't correct them. I walked through the house slowly when they handed me the keys, noting every corner where I had been overlooked, every hallway where my voice had been ignored. The second thing I did was fund a scholarship. Full ride, 4 years, STEM majors only. But there was one condition: applicants had to write an essay titled, "What Family Support Means to Me." The irony. Delicious. The twist. The scholarship would be named after my great-grandmother, the only woman in my lineage who had once told me, "Your mind will take you places their money never could." Bella had no idea who she was. She probably thought the name was some rich benefactor. That part made me smile. Next came the quiet buyouts. Bella's boyfriend ran a small fashion PR firm, mostly handling social media campaigns for mid-tier influencers and trendy startups. I didn't approach him directly. I had a shell company do it. They presented as a media tech firm seeking partnerships for a new brand accelerator. His company agreed to the terms. 6 weeks later, I owned controlling interest. 3 months after that, I installed a new creative director, one with zero tolerance for nepotism and an eye for actual results. Bella lost her consulting gig within a month. Still, I said nothing. Not to my parents, not to Bella, not to anyone. My Instagram stayed private, my LinkedIn unchanged. I kept the illusion alive. Let them think I was still working somewhere in tech. Let them wonder why I never asked for anything. That was the beauty of it. They believed silence equaled failure. They had no idea that silence in my hands had become a scalpel, sharp, precise, surgical. Then came the wedding invite. It arrived in a pale pink envelope, the same shade as the roses Bella always demanded for her birthdays. The card inside was embossed with gold letters and her name, front and center. Her fiance's name, followed in smaller font. Classic. It was scheduled for early June, in a winery 2 hours outside the city. I wasn't asked to be a bridesmaid. I wasn't even listed with a +1. In fact, the RSVP card said, "We hope you can join us. If you're free." If I'm free? The woman who once borrowed my shoes for job interviews. The woman whose rent I covered without her knowing during her senior year because I saw the eviction notice taped to her door and didn't want her to feel embarrassed. I stared at the card and felt nothing, not rage, not sadness, just confirmation that no matter how high I climbed, their view of me would always be rooted in the dirt. But I didn't decline. I didn't accept either. I waited. 2 weeks before the wedding, Bella sent a group message to family and close friends. Reminder to RSVP by Friday. Don't want to miss anyone. That's when I made my move. I contacted the venue. Not as a guest but as the new owner. See, that winery had been struggling financially. The original owners were hoping to retire but had no buyers. My shell company had been in talks with them for over a month. The papers were signed the day after Bella's RSVP reminder. The venue still had her deposit, but now it had something else, a new proprietor with a very personal agenda. I didn't cancel the event. That would have been too easy, too loud. Instead, I changed the rules. No outside catering. No overnight guest stays unless cleared by ownership. And absolutely no fireworks, Bella's favorite part. I even added a new clause. All event photography must be cleared by venue legal before being posted publicly. She never noticed. Not until rehearsal day. That's when the event coordinator told her they had new policies and updated terms. Bella called me, frantic. For the first time in years. Her voice breathless with irritation. Hey, I just found out the venue's under new ownership and they're being super weird. Any chance you know someone there? Could you pull some strings? I paused, let the silence stretch just enough for discomfort. Then I said, I might know someone. I'll see what I can do. I didn't. I let the restrictions stand. And when she walked down the aisle with fewer guests, no fireworks, and a wine selection that didn't include her favorite vintage, I sat quietly in the back row, watching it all unfold. The seating chart had me placed in the back corner, right next to the emergency exit. Not that I minded. From there, I could see everything: the strained smiles, the forced elegance, the cracks beneath the curated image. Bella floated through the vineyard like royalty, veil catching the late spring breeze, her grin wider than necessary. Her dress sparkled, but her eyes were scanning constantly, not for joy, for validation. That's what she always needed most. She wasn't searching for her groom. She was searching for admiration, and she didn't find it in my direction. I clapped when the ceremony ended, lightly, politely, like a stranger who had stumbled into a high-budget community theater play. I sipped my drink, listened to conversations that danced around topics like scholarships, promotions, business ventures. I remained quiet, because the best kind of revenge doesn't interrupt. It observes, it waits, it lets its target wonder if the silence means everything or nothing at all. Dinner was served late. Apparently, the custom dessert Bella had ordered was delayed. A small but notable inconvenience, especially when you've spent months curating an Instagram-perfect evening. I knew the catering company. My firm had bought them out through a hospitality acquisition 2 weeks earlier. No sabotage, just corporate efficiency. If a cake wasn't delivered on time, it was because priority had shifted to higher-paying clients. Her fiancé gave a speech. It was charming, in a forgettable sort of way. Something about shared dreams and growing old together. A few jokes about Bella's stubbornness. Laughter, applause. And then Bella stood. She cleared her throat, raised her champagne flute, and in front of friends, extended family, and more than a few ex-boyfriends she'd invited out of pettiness, she said, I want to thank everyone who supported me on my journey, especially my parents, who never let me fall, who were always there with encouragement, love, and, well, let's be honest, funding. The room erupted in laughter. I didn't laugh. I simply raised my glass and met my father's eyes from across the room. He looked down. Maybe guilt, maybe recognition, maybe just discomfort. But he looked away. Later, she came over. Not to apologize, not to explain, just to gloat. She crouched next to my table, sipped from her Ross, and said, "Glad you could make it. Hope the food was okay. We had to cut a few corners, but I guess not everyone notices that kind of stuff." She smiled like she was the one in control, like I'd shown up to admire her victory. I nodded, returned the smile, and asked, "Did you enjoy the venue?" She blinked, caught slightly off guard. "Yeah, it's cute. Could have been more flexible though. Their rules were kinda ridiculous." I leaned in slightly, just enough to let the words land where they needed to. "I'll pass that along to management. They're still getting used to new ownership." Her expression shifted, the kind of shift that happens when realization creeps in, but denial hasn't left yet. Her lips parted, a question formed, but I stood up before it could land. "Thanks for the wine," I said, placing my glass gently on the table. "Be sure to check your inbox tomorrow. There's a fun clause in the venue contract you might have missed." I walked away slowly, deliberately, leaving behind confusion, suspicion, and a ripple of discomfort. The next day, the clause triggered. Nothing dramatic, just a fine for exceeding sound ordinances by 7 decibels during the DJ set. But more importantly, the contract included a clause about publicity use. Any imagery taken on venue grounds was subject to approval before posting. That meant every photo, every reel, every carefully choreographed moment had to be cleared by my team, which meant delay, which meant silence on her feeds for weeks, a digital blackout during the one time she'd craved validation most. Her posts trickled in eventually. Heavily filtered, captions vague, engagement down, comments asking why there were no fireworks, no designer cake, no signature Ross bottles with their initials. The replies were awkward, deflective. She was unraveling not publicly, but in the quiet ways that matter more. The subtle shifts in tone, the shrinking spotlight, the realization that something had happened and she couldn't quite name it, only feel it. I didn't gloat. I didn't share screenshots. I didn't even mention it to friends. That's the thing about true revenge, it's not for show. It's a seed you plant, water with silence, and watch grow into something undeniable. A week later, I received a group email from my father. Subject line: "Family fundraiser, please share." Apparently, they were organizing a campaign to help young artists and creatives, a thinly veiled way of saying Bella needed financial help for a brand she was launching. The email mentioned Mackenzie's impressive network and how proud we are of both our daughters. I stared at the screen for a while, debating whether to delete or respond. I chose the latter. My reply was short, precise, unforgiving. "Thanks for including me. Unfortunately, I've redirected my philanthropic budget for the year to institutions that invested in my education. As you might recall, I finance mine alone. I'm sure Bella's supporters will rise to the occasion just like mine never did." I clicked send, blocked the thread, and sat back. That message wasn't just a refusal. It was a mirror. I had handed them the reflection they spent years avoiding, and they'd have to sit with it. It wasn't long after I sent that reply that the group chat started glitching. Not technically, socially. The dynamic was unraveling. Passive-aggressive messages turned into full-blown shade. My uncle chimed in with a Bible verse about humility. My cousin typed a under Bella's fundraiser link. Someone else, probably one of my mother's bridge club friends, responded with, "Weren't you just in Paris?" Bella left it on read. They'd never admitted outright, but I'd become the ghost in the family machine, always present, rarely visible, yet impossible to ignore. Every holiday photo they uploaded without me drew comments like, "Where's Mackenzie?" or "Did she take the photo?" Even their silence became a broadcast. That Christmas, I sent no gifts, not even a card. Instead, I mailed one manila envelope. No return address, just a typed letter on thick cream paper. Inside was a copy of my commencement speech, the one I never got to give because Bella had convinced my parents to skip my ceremony and attend her high school awards brunch instead. The speech began, "To those who believed in me, thank you. To those who didn't, thank you even more." There was no signature. I later heard, through a friend of a friend, that my mom cried. Good, let her cry. Let her feel For just a moment, the hollow space she carved by choosing flash over substance, favoritism over fairness. She raised 2 daughters, one with checkbooks, one with scars. And now, the one she forgot had become unforgettable. I don't think Bella ever understood that I wasn't trying to ruin her. I didn't want to sabotage her marriage or humiliate her publicly. That would have been easy, obvious, predictable. No, I wanted her to succeed on her own. I wanted her to feel what it's like to swim without floaties, to fall and taste gravel, to realize that not everyone would catch her because I'd stopped doing it years ago and she was falling, quietly, awkwardly, like someone pretending they meant to trip. Her brand launch was underwhelming. Despite the glossy photo shoots and curated influencer unboxings, the numbers didn't add up. Her website crashed on opening day. The customer service line redirected to a Google Voice number. Several of her early clients demanded refunds after shipping delays. I knew all this because one of my companies handled the logistics not directly, but through a tiered fulfillment partnership I had quietly acquired a year prior. They never knew who owned the holding company. That was the point. My assistant came to me one morning with a half smile and a tablet. Thought you'd want to see this. On screen was Bella, holding back tears in a now deleted TikTok rant about toxic supply chain vendors and jealous competitors. She never named names, but her tone screamed victimhood. I watched it once, then again. Then I put the tablet down and said, "Send her a bouquet of hydrangeas." My assistant blinked. "Seriously?" I nodded. "White ones. Include a card. No signature. Just the words. Growth is rarely comfortable." She sent them. Bella posted a photo of the flowers with a cryptic caption. Even in silence, there's support. Her followers assumed it came from her husband, or a brand partner, or God. She had no idea it came from the woman who stopped rescuing her years ago. That same week, my father reached out. Not through email, not by phone, but through a handwritten letter. The handwriting was shaky, older, less sure of itself. He apologized. For what exactly was unclear. He mentioned missed moments, misunderstandings, regrets. He said he was proud of me, that he watched my company's story unfold online and felt equal parts admiration and shame. He said Bella had always needed more and they'd thought I needed less. Because I made it look easy. Because I didn't cry when told no. Because I kept going. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. No response. Letting them back in would have rewritten the ending. And this wasn't a redemption story. This was a record. A ledger. Every choice, every absence, every overlooked achievement accounted for. Weeks passed. Winter turned into spring. The family tried, gently, to reel me back in. Invites to brunches, tagged posts, voicemails about grandma's birthday. But I had learned the art of silence, not avoidance power. My life was full, my time expensive, my attention no longer free. Instead of family dinners, I had board meetings. Instead of holiday trips, I funded orphanage tech upgrades overseas. I found joy not in revenge, but in the quiet knowledge that I no longer needed closure. I had results, I had receipts, I had peace, and I had the one thing they never imagined I'd earn without them: respect. I didn't need to slam any doors. Just walking away was loud enough. While Bella scrambled to salvage her image, I redirected my focus to a mentorship foundation I had quietly started. It wasn't flashy, no gala events, no Instagram reels, just real young women, mostly first generation college students, learning how to negotiate salaries, protect intellectual property, and build without waiting for approval. Each time one of them closed a seed round or launched their first product, I felt a deeper pride than anything my family had ever stirred in me. These girls didn't beg to be believed. They just needed someone who wouldn't leave them to starve. At the finish line, one of them, a freshman from Baltimore, asked me during a session, "Were you always this strong?" I paused before answering, not because I didn't know, but because the real answer was ugly. No, I told her. I had to watch people I loved turn their backs, And then I had to decide if I wanted revenge or freedom. I chose both. Carefully, she smiled like she understood. Meanwhile, Bella was losing traction. The influencer deals dried up. Her posts were now more personal, messy apartments in the background, filters set to maximum, captions that rambled about life being unfair and people changing. Her friends, the ones who'd crowded her bridal suite and toasted with mimosas, were suddenly too busy. The algorithm had shifted, and she wasn't trending anymore. I didn't celebrate her decline. That's not the point of quiet vengeance. It's not about dancing on graves. It's about creating something so complete that the past no longer claws at your ankles. Still, I kept tabs. Through a former classmate who happened to work in finance, I learned Bella had tried to secure a business line of credit using our parents' home as collateral. The bank denied her, not because the numbers didn't add up, but because the property wasn't in their name anymore. It was mine, and she didn't even know. I had purchased it under a different entity, restored it to its original frame, replaced the warped siding with brick, rebuilt the porch my mother had once said wasn't worth fixing. I never planned to live there. It wasn't nostalgia. It was ownership, literal and metaphorical. A way to reclaim the ground where I was buried under their expectations, only to rise without applause. Bella called my mom that night in hysterics. I know this because she left a voicemail on my old number by accident. I hadn't used that line in years, but the voicemail still worked. Her voice cracked as she raged about betrayal and how could they let this happen. My mother tried to calm her, said it must be a mistake. She didn't realize I had been holding the deed for 9 months. I forwarded the voicemail to myself and saved it. Not as a trophy, just a reminder. Pain has an echo. Eventually, it returns to its sender. That same week, my parents finally asked to meet in person. They offered to talk things out over lunch. Neutral ground. My assistant asked if I wanted to respond. I told her to book them a table, but under her name. Let them sit, let them wonder, let them taste what it feels like to be the one left waiting. Instead, I flew to Oregon. There was a startup there I'd been watching. 2 black women, barely 30, building an eco-housing material stronger than concrete and a fraction of the cost. They reminded me of who I used to be, full of fire, wearing worn sneakers and living off grant money and bad coffee. I invested quietly, offered mentorship, told them, keep your cap table clean. Don't give away your leverage for a headline. They listened. Meanwhile, back home, my parents called again. This time, they left a message together, apologizing, asking for a second chance, not because they wanted reconciliation, but because they were starting to understand what they'd lost. Not just a daughter, but an ally, a shield, the one person who would have caught their fall before it made the news. I didn't reply. Instead, I funded a renovation of the local community college's STEM wing, the one I used to study in while working night shifts. I named the main lab after my childhood piano teacher, a woman who once told me, just because they don't clap doesn't mean the music isn't beautiful. Bella wouldn't understand that kind of loyalty. Neither would my parents. Their version of love came with receipts, conditions, and expiration dates. Mine did in single quotes. By summer, the ripple effects were undeniable. Bella's brand folded. Quietly, the website went dark. Her social media bio changed from founder to creative soul on a journey. My mother stopped posting family photos. My father retired early, citing stress. No one said it out loud, but the collapse was visible. Their golden child had shattered, and the one they'd overlooked, she was nowhere near the wreckage, not because I fled, but because I had built something higher. Summer heat melted into a muted fall. While the leaves began their slow descent, I watched the invitations arrive. The first came from my mother, handwritten on ivory stock, sealed with a monogram W. Inside was a vague message about a family healing weekend at a lakeside cabin. The irony? It was the same retreat I had been excluded from the year Bella got accepted into NYU. That year, they said there weren't enough rooms. This time, they claimed they wanted to start over. I didn't reply. A second envelope followed. This one from Bella. Less elegant. Glittery ink. Fox enthusiasm bleeding through every exaggerated exclamation. Let's catch up. I've missed you so much. Life is too short for grudges. Her words were syrupy, designed for an audience. But I wasn't one. I'd moved off that stage a long time ago. They weren't extending an olive branch. They were building a lifeboat, and I wasn't about to jump in. Instead, I forwarded both envelopes to my legal team. No action required, just documentation. Because the deeper I climbed, the more I understood the value of paper trails. Some might say I was cruel, that I should have forgiven, that family is sacred, but sacred things aren't supposed to suffocate you, and forgiveness isn't a currency to be spent on people who only remember your name when theirs is in trouble. At that time, I was negotiating a merger. A healthcare analytics platform wanted to join forces with my company. They admired my work, but more importantly, they respected my silence. I had never aired out my past publicly, never named names, never turned my story into clickbait. In an industry addicted to noise, that quiet power became my signature. During one of the final meetings, the CEO leaned over and said, "You know, your reputation precedes you. They say you don't burn bridges, you just buy the land beneath them." I didn't correct him, because sometimes perception is protection. As the deal closed, my net worth crossed a threshold I hadn't even aimed for. It wasn't about the zeros. It was about having the autonomy they tried to deny me, the ability to move, build, pivot without anyone's permission. Bella, meanwhile, launched a podcast, a clumsy attempt at reinvention, Sisters and Scars. She called it complete with scripted vulnerability and sponsored skincare reads. Episode 1 featured her sobbing about feeling abandoned and always being misunderstood. She never mentioned my name, but every word dripped with implication. To the casual listener, I was the villain, but I didn't flinch. I let her speak. You see, silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. While she broadcasted breakdowns, I secured broadcast rights for a new documentary series profiling underrepresented tech founders. Real people, real grit, no filters. Bella's podcast lasted 6 episodes. Mine? Already backed by 3 major platforms before the pilot even aired. When I saw her at a mutual friend's art opening months later, her smile flickered. Polite, nervous, she approached with champagne in hand and said, "You look powerful." It wasn't a compliment. It was an observation. I nodded, glanced at the canvas behind her, a swirl of blue and gold with a single crimson slash. "You ever wonder if the damage is the art?" I asked. She blinked. "What? Nothing," I replied. "Nice to see you." I left before she could answer. That night, she tagged me in a post. A throwback photo of us as kids matching Halloween costumes, holding plastic pumpkins. Caption: "Some bonds never break." I didn't engage, because here's the truth they never tell you. Just because someone remembers you doesn't mean they deserve access to who you've become. Winter arrived with its usual hush, but this time, the stillness didn't sting. It felt earned, deserved, like the quiet after a long trial, not of weather, but of character. By then, my family had stopped pretending everything was fine. The performances thinned, the group chats dried up. There were no more emails marked urgent or calls made under the guise of checking in. The machine they had built, all PR smiles and curated holiday photos, began to rust from disuse. Turns out, when you stop fueling dysfunction, it sputters out on its own. And me? I stayed steady. My calendar was full, my inbox tighter than ever. But even with all that motion, I had never felt more grounded. Then came the Alumni Award. It wasn't something I applied for. The university reached out on their own a decade after I'd walked across that graduation stage alone. The same ceremony my parents had skipped. They wanted to honor me as Distinguished Entrepreneur of the Year, not just for my company's growth, but for the jobs it created, the scholarships it funded, the way it shifted hiring pipelines toward equity. They asked if I would give a speech. I said yes, not for applause, Not for headlines, but for one reason: I wanted the girl I used to be, the one who took out a loan just to afford cap and gown effies, to finally stand on that stage without swallowing disappointment. On the evening of the event, I wore navy. Sharp lines, no frills. My assistant handed me a card before I walked into the auditorium. I thought it was from the university president. It was in single quotes. T.it was from Bella. I'll be watching from the live stream. Do me proud even if I never deserved you. For a brief second, I stood still, not frozen, just centered. Her words weren't an apology. Not really, but they didn't need to be. They were a confession wrapped in surrender. I folded the note and tucked it into my clutch. The auditorium was full, cameras everywhere. I stood behind the podium, adjusted the mic, and looked out into the sea of lights. I was raised to believe success meant being liked. I began. That fitting in would protect you. That shrinking your brilliance would earn you love. I believed that until I stood on this very campus as a student and realized survival costs too much when it requires erasing yourself. A hush fell over the crowd. Real hush, not polite silence, but that charged stillness that comes when people are actually listening. My family didn't attend my graduation, I continued. They had other plans, but I did. I showed up for myself, and that choice to show up alone was the beginning of everything. I didn't name names, didn't drag skeletons, but I told the truth, clean and sharp. And when I was done, the applause didn't feel hollow. It felt earned, honest, like rain on dry soil. Later that night, I checked my messages. Bella hadn't written again, but my father had, just 2 lines. I watched. I cried. I wish we'd seen you sooner. I didn't reply, not out of spite, out of clarity. Some acknowledgments come too late to be useful. The next morning, a news site ran a headline. Tech founder turns pain into power and pays it forward. Underneath it, a photo of me on stage, framed by a standing ovation. I didn't smile. In the photo, I didn't have to. The posture, the eyes, the presence, they told the story. I sent that article to no one, but I knew it had circulated. You could feel it in the ripple. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years started following my nonprofit's page. Old high school friends suddenly resurfaced with congratulatory DMs. Even Bella posted a quote to her story that read, "Sometimes the one they forgot builds the house they end up knocking on." No credit, no tag, just the implication. That was enough, because the difference between noise and resonance is this: noise begs to be heard. Resonance lingers without saying a word. The year turned again. A new January, quiet but heavy. I marked it not with fireworks or champagne, but with a single letter from the family attorney. Not mine, theirs. My parents were amending their will, not because they wanted to, because they had to. The firm representing them had been notified by their own accountant that too many assets they assumed were in their control weren't. The house? Transferred. The trust? Dismantled legally and rebuilt under my separate foundation, thanks to a repayment clause they had signed years earlier. They hadn't read the fine print, but I had. They requested mediation, not to fight but to beg, and I mean that in the most literal sense. I received a formal offer, joint management of what remained of the family portfolio, shared stewardship, they called it. I laughed for the first time in weeks, because it wasn't about love, it was about leverage. They were drowning, and I was dry land, but I wasn't a lifeboat anymore. I declined the meeting, politely, firmly. I added a clause of my own. If they continued to use my name in family press or social media statements, I would pursue defamation under image rights. That was my line. I wasn't spiteful. I was done. My therapist once told me, "You're not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm." Back then, I thought boundaries were cruel. Now I saw them as necessary architecture. I began channeling that energy elsewhere, specifically into a grant for women over 30 returning to STEM after career breaks. The fund exploded overnight. Applications poured in. One, from a woman in her 40s who'd left school decades ago to raise siblings, made me cry, not out of sadness. Out of recognition. She wasn't looking for a handout. She was building again, this time for herself. Meanwhile, Bella was dabbling in real estate, or trying to. The only problem? Her credit was wrecked, and the contacts she used to rely on now filtered her calls. One by one, the bridges she'd sprinted across began to burn. She made a video on her birthday. Rambling, unfocused, wine glass in frame. Sometimes your own people leave you to die, she said, eyes glossy, and when you crawl back, they slam the door. The comments were divided, half sympathetic, half asking who she was talking about. I didn't respond, not in DMs, not in threads, not in life. My name never left her mouth, but the void where I used to be was louder than anything she said. That month, a woman approached me after a speaking engagement at a corporate women's summit. Older, elegant, looked like she had once terrified boardrooms and built empires with a single look. You remind me of my daughter, she said softly. Except she still tries to earn their love. You stopped. That's rare, I thanked her. She handed me a card, executive board seat on a national initiative reimagining K-12 education funding. If you're ready, she said, we could use your kind of quiet thunder. I accepted the next day, not because I needed the prestige, but because legacy isn't always about surnames or DNA. Sometimes inheritance means leaving behind the version of you that begged for crumbs and building something that feeds others. Spring brought storms, not just the literal ones, though thunder did rumble through the sky as if echoing some unspoken reckoning. No, this was something deeper, a tension building beneath years of silence, like a wound healing too quickly over infection. It started with a voicemail. I was boarding a flight to Boston when my phone lit up with a number I hadn't saved, but I knew it, my father. I let it go to voice. I didn't even hesitate. Later, in the hotel room, I played it on speaker while unpacking. His voice cracked before he finished the first sentence. I don't know who you are anymore, but I know who I failed. He paused. We were wrong, not just in what we did, but in what we didn't do, what we didn't see. You were the foundation and we walked on you like flooring. The line fell quiet for a moment, then a sigh, not dramatic, not staged, just tired. I don't expect you to forgive us, but I hope, someday, you find a version of us worth remembering. Double quotes, click. No apology from my mother. No second message. Just that one. I stood there, in a room paid for by a company I built, listening to a man I once adored struggle to articulate guilt, and for the first time, I didn't feel angry, I felt free. You see, the opposite of hate isn't love, it's indifference. And that's what I had now. Not numbness, just clarity. They couldn't take anything from me anymore because I no longer asked them to give me anything. I didn't delete the voicemail, but I didn't call back. Instead, I visited the community center I had funded last year. The mural outside, painted by local kids, featured a woman with wild curls, headphones on, coding on a laptop. Underneath it, spray painted in soft orange. Your silence after the pain is breaking them. I didn't ask who wrote that line. I didn't need to dot a T. The dedication event. One of the girls asked me, how do you stay strong when the people who hurt you think they're the victims? I smiled, not because the question was funny, but because it was familiar. You stop explaining, I said. You start creating. Let your existence prove them wrong. That night, my assistant forwarded an email she thought I should see. It was from a local journalist working on a piece about generational trauma and financial favoritism. The subject line, would you like to share your story? I closed it, not because I was afraid, but because I didn't need to be part of their narrative anymore. They could write their think pieces, create their panels, host their podcasts. I had already lived it, and I had already won, not by exposing them, but by no longer needing to. It happened on a Sunday, the kind with slow clouds and no commitments. I was in the middle of pruning my balcony garden when the intercom buzzed. Not a delivery, no scheduled guests. I pressed the button, expecting maybe a lost courier. Instead, her voice. Hi, it's Mom. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I know I should have called first. Or maybe not at all. But I'm downstairs. I just wanted to see you. Years ago, that sentence would have sent me spiraling, racing to clean, to fix my face, to prepare some version of myself she might finally accept. But not anymore. I stared at the speaker for a full minute before walking back inside. I made tea. I opened my laptop. I didn't buzz her in. 10 minutes passed. Then a knock at the lobby glass. I didn't go down. The security camera showed her pacing, coat wrapped tightly, face stiff. She looked older, not just in age and posture, like gravity had found her bones after decades of floating through life untouched. I watched, not out of cruelty, but curiosity. What does a person look like when they've run out of justifications? Eventually, she sat on the edge of the concrete planter, waiting. A few tenants passed. One offered a greeting. She nodded but didn't engage. I let her sit. After 40 minutes, she stood up, dusted off her skirt, and pulled something from her purse, a letter, it looked like. She slid it into the building's mail slot. Then she left. No drama, no tears, just footsteps disappearing into the wind. I didn't retrieve the envelope immediately. I waited 2 days. When I finally opened it, the handwriting looked unfamiliar, shaky, sparse. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't even a request. It was a list of things she remembered about me, moments I had long since tucked away or buried beneath sharper memories. The time I helped organize Dad's papers before his audit. The night I stayed up baking cupcakes for Bella's failed fundraiser. The year I paid for Christmas when they both forgot to budget for it. Each line ended with a period, not a heart, not a sorry, just a full stop. She didn't ask for a response, and that somehow felt real. Closure doesn't always look like an embrace. Sometimes it looks like a final sentence with no reply. I didn't keep the letter. I didn't throw it away either. I took it to the lake, the same one they once went to without me. I folded the paper into a boat and set it afloat. The ink bled into the ripples. The lines vanished. The past dissolved, not forgiven, not forgotten, just released. That night, I slept without dreaming. By autumn, things changed, not loudly, but completely. My name started appearing in places my family never visited. Not gossip columns, not holiday cards, professional circles, industry panels, college syllabi. The firm I built was now funding research across 3 major universities. I wasn't just a founder anymore, I was a case study. I got used to walking into rooms where no one knew my past. Only my portfolio, only the present I'd carved, and yet reminders still arrived dressed as nostalgia, wrapped in guilt. Bella sent a message. 2 lines. I don't know how to be your sister, but I miss trying. I read it 5 times. Not because I was moved, because I wasn't sure if she was serious or just lonely. That's the thing no one tells you about estrangement. It's not always a door slamming. Sometimes it's an unanswered knock again and again until silence becomes the only reply left that doesn't cost you your peace. That week, I stood on stage in San Francisco, headlining a women's tech summit. Behind me, a 10-foot screen displayed one sentence in white. Your survival is not a footnote. It's the whole story. I didn't mention betrayal. I didn't speak their names. I talked about innovation, resilience, hiring practices. But afterward, during the Q&A, a college senior raised her hand. She looked nervous. How do you succeed when your family resents your success? I paused. The room hushed. Then I answered, you outgrow the need for their applause, and you stop handing them scripts for scenes they'll only sabotage. Nods filled the crowd. A few tears, they understood. Later that night, I received an email from my father. Not dramatic, not pleading, just one attachment, a scanned photo of a note I wrote when I was 13, scribbled in bright ink on notebook paper. One day I'll make something real, something no one can take. Underneath, he had typed, you did. I stared at it. I didn't reply. What was there left to say? He was no longer the audience I was performing for. That version of me, the daughter waiting to be seen, no longer stood in the wings. She had exited stage right, gracefully, silently. The spotlight now belonged to the woman who stayed, who built, who reclaimed, and she no longer looked back. The irony is, I never needed to win. I only ever wanted to be heard, seen, treated like I mattered, not managed like a liability. But when they handed me silence, I used it like mortar. Layer by layer, I built something unshakable from what they abandoned. Now, I don't measure value in attention, or gifts, or invitations to holidays I'd spend recovering from anyway. I measure it in the lives touched by what I've built, in the interns who don't flinch when they speak in meetings, in the girls who walk into STEM classrooms and see someone who looks like them running the session. It's a different kind of legacy, one without marble countertops or family crests, one written in grants awarded, businesses launched, communities transformed. I visited my old university again last month, quietly, no speech, no entourage, just me, walking the same paths I once rushed down, head bowed, praying not to be noticed. Because my parents weren't there, this time, I held my head high. I stopped by the library, ran my fingers over the brickwork, remembered the nights I stayed until 2 a.m., chasing something I couldn't name back then. It wasn't ambition. It was escape. Now, there's nothing to run from. I don't know if Bella still speaks to our parents. I don't ask. The chain that once bound us is broken not with bitterness, but with clarity. Freedom isn't the absence of people. It's the absence of their control. One morning, I received a package.no note, just a frame, inside it, a printed email from my first year out of college. The subject line, scholarship rejection, attached to it, a sticky note, glad you didn't listen. I smiled, not because they finally understood, but because I no longer needed them to. You see, the thing about family is this. Sometimes blood is thicker than water, but sometimes ink is thicker than both. The ink that signs contracts, that prints checks, that leaves receipts, that tells your story in your own words, on your own terms. I framed that package, not as a trophy but as a marker, a point in time where I stopped waiting for approval and started living in proof. They had their story, now I have mine. And mine doesn't end with reunion. It ends with peace, the kind they never gave me, but the kind I gave myself. Subscribe for more heart-stopping stories of betrayal, revenge, and quiet power. You won't believe what's coming next.